Hey all, it's Jess from Sunflower Dairy, and today we are in the kitchen because there is a winter storm blowing in outside. There is tons of frozen rain and it's turning to ice outside. So today we are spending time in the house to get some things done in here while the crazy winter storm is going on outside. So today I am going to be starting a sourdough starter because in the winter time I like to do a sourdough starter because I'm inside a little bit more than I normally am in the warmer seasons, so I like to have a sourdough starter going so that I can use that while I'm doing all kinds of from scratch cooking and baking. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how I do a sourdough starter today. Alright, so first off, I am wanting to grind my own flour for making the sourdough starter. So to do that, I am using wheat berries and a flour grinder. So I am using Prairie Gold wheat berries, and I have grown wheat berries before. Just kind of show you what those look like. So my recipe says that I need 2 cups of flour. So I'm going to go ahead and grind up wheat berries to get about 2 cups. I'm going to go ahead and fill this up here. Alright, also I have the flour all grinded, and as you can see, it looks like actual regular flour. So it's pretty cool to see the wheat berries turn from the wheat berries into flour. Alright, now that we have the flour grinded, we're going to go ahead and make our starter. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put 1 teaspoon of salt in here, and I just eyeball stuff when I measure. If you haven't been cooking for a really long time, I don't recommend that, but for me, I've been cooking from scratch for a very long time, so I kind of have an idea of how things look as far as measurements. Alright, I'm going to add 2 cups of flour. And of course I'm making more of a mess here than most people, but alright, and that made about 2 cups. Okay, now we are going to add yeast, about 1 tablespoon of yeast. And we are going to add some organic sugar to this to give the sourdough starter something to eat as it ferments. Alright, so I'm going to add about 3 spoons of sugar. Alright, and now I'm going to be adding my water. I'm just going to be adding a little bit at a time. This is supposed to look like a bubbly paste. So we're just going to mix till we get the consistency we want. So when you're making a sourdough starter, so you want it to be a live fermented thing. So you don't want to use metal for a mixing bowl or a spoon. So you want to use glass for your bowl for your starter, and you want to use a wooden spoon when you're stirring it. And when this gets to the consistency that we want, then we are going to put a breathable cloth over this jar, and then we're going to let this sour for 2 to 3 days and ferment. So we're going to be every day stirring this a couple times a day, because the ingredients are going to separate as the fermenting process happens. So you want to keep all those ingredients stirred in, and you will see your starter grow. And then after everything starts, all the ingredients start getting eaten up by the fermenting process, then your sourdough starter is going to start shrinking back down. But you are going to be seeing bubbles in your starter. So after you have let it ferment for 2 or 3 days and stirred it multiple times a day, then your starter should be ready. So when your starter is ready, then you're going to feed it one more time, and you're either going to then use your starter, or you can put your starter in the refrigerator, and that will kind of slow down the fermenting process, so you won't have to use it as quickly. So if you leave your sourdough starter out on the counter and let it ferment, then it's going to be, the fermentation process is going to be eating your ingredients up faster, which your sourdough starter needs ingredients to eat to keep the fermenting process going, or else that's when your starter dies, when your starter runs out of ingredients to eat. So if you don't want to have to feed your starter every day, putting it in the refrigerator, you can put it in there. I've put my starter in there for about a week, and then say on Saturdays you can take your starter out, feed it again, and then if you want to use it, you can go ahead and use it. And then if you have taken quite a bit of your sourdough starter out, then you can feed it again to replace the ingredients to have more starter, and then you can put it back in the refrigerator. So, and like I said, putting it in the refrigerator just slows down the fermentation process so that it doesn't eat the ingredients as quickly, so you don't have to feed it every day like you would if you have it sitting out on the counter and it's at room temperature. Alright, so this is looking pretty good. Add a little bit more warm water. And the warm water that I'm using, I have about 1.5 cups, and I'm just adding a little bit as I go. Getting everything thoroughly mixed together, making sure I'm scraping the bottom. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. All right, so can you see those, all those bubbles and air pockets? So that means that your starter is alive and awake with the yeast. So there's bubbles all over in here. And as it ferments, you're going to get more and more bubbles. And eventually, as your sourdough starter is fermenting, your sourdough starter will start smelling more and more sour. So I'm going to go ahead and put a cloth over this and let this set. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and put a cloth over this, and then I'm going to take a rubber band just so that it holds the cloth on there. And like I said, I'm going to let this set for 2 or 3 days, and multiple times a day I'm just going to go ahead and stir this and make sure that the ingredients aren't separating in here. And then in 2 or 3 days, this should smell very sour and it should be ready to feed again. And then we can decide if we want to put it in the fridge or if we want to leave this out on the counter and use it. Alright, so I just want to show you all. So this sourdough starter has literally only been sitting on the counter for a couple minutes and it's already starting to rise. So when you last saw me like just a couple minutes ago, the starter was about here and then it's all the way up here already. So if you wanted to, I have had my starters bubble over before. So if you wanted to just split your starters in half, do like half in one glass jar and half in another glass jar, and just, you know, keep an eye on both of them. That way you're not having your starter flow out and rise so much that it goes all over the place. You just want to make sure that everything is thoroughly mixed together, but you can split your starter into 2 jars so that way your starter's not overflowing everywhere. But I just wanted to show you how much that's already rising, and you can see all those bubbles in there. There's bubbles all over the place. So yeah, it's almost just about to top, and usually within the first hour these starters really rise. So if you want to separate this like I said into those 2 jars so you're not having your sourdough starter go everywhere, that's probably a wise idea. But look at those gorgeous bubbles. Like I said, those bubbles there, you're just going to keep getting more bubbles as your sourdough starter keeps fermenting. Alright, so it has officially only been like 1 or 2 more minutes and it is already bubbling over the top. But just look at all of those bubbles in that starter. That's how you know you have a really good starter, when it's starting to already rise this quickly. That's definitely a good starter. Alright, so for my sourdoughs, I like to use them for a little bit of everything. So I'll use my starter to make bread, or I'll make sourdough focaccia, or you can make any kind of sourdough. People make sourdough pancakes or sourdough crackers, or you can make all kinds of stuff with sourdough. So it's wise to have a sourdough starter, and that way if you keep your sourdough starter going, a lot of times you don't have to keep a lot of yeast in the house, because a lot of times you can use your sourdough starter, you know, in recipes that you would usually use yeast for. But you have to just make sure, you know, you keep it active and it keeps going. Look at it. It is already bubbling over. It is so active. Look at that starter. Alright all, thank you for making sourdough starter with me today. Thanks for watching. Have a blessed day.